Welcome back to our second in the series of lectures on V'chitzu Chavos Me'itim, Swords into Plowshares. Last time we spoke about the general development, the Sikha, where the Rebbe MHM said that the declaration of the heads of state at the United Nations in Shavat, Tavshin Beis, 1992, was the beginning of Swords into Plowshares. And now we're going to talk about some specific developments in that area. If I were to ask you, what is the most powerful sword ever created, ever devised by mankind? Everyone would probably say, obviously, nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, the most powerful, most destructive sword ever conceived of, ever developed, and has the power and the potential to destroy the whole planet, everybody on the face of the earth. Chas v'shalom, Rachmana litzlan. And just to emphasize that point, it's worthwhile to go back over some of the history of the past 50 years or so and point out that there were times during the so-called Cold War between the United States and Russia when the world was on the verge of such a nuclear destruction. So that was the Cold War. Now, going ahead 10 years to 1992, when this declaration of Swords into Plowshares, V'chitzu Chavos Me'itim, did take place, everything was phased out. As we mentioned last time, the ISTC, International Science and Technology Center, was set up in Moscow to employ the now unemployed nuclear scientists who were working for the Russian military, and they were given projects to use nuclear science, nuclear technology for peaceful uses. What I'm going to tell you tonight is about a story of this development of nuclear technology being made peaceful that happened right here in New York, and I personally had the chus to be involved in it. The story started like this. It all started with a prominent Lubavitcher Chassid, Mashpia, named Rabbi Yitzchak Springer, Olav Shalom. Rabbi Springer, with the approval of the Rebbe MHM, used to put full-page ads in the New York Times, publicizing all the inyanim of the Gula, all the inyanim of that the Rebbe MHM is Melech HaMashiach, and how people should start improving their lives and upgrading their lives in the observance of Torah and mitzvahs if they're Jewish, the observance of the 7 Noachite laws that apply to all mankind if they're not Jewish, and to contact him for either information, for advice, for reports that he would give into the Rebbe MHM of people increasing their observance of mitzvahs and so on. And one of the things he discussed there in one of his ads was that the Rebbe MHM's announcement that the era of Swords into Plowshares had already begun, as we spoke about last week. So he got a call from a lawyer in Manhattan named Joel Gray. And Mr. Gray tells him that he is the president of a corporation which is developing a nuclear reactor which is non-proliferative. Says, the story is, one day a man walks into his office. This man was a prominent nuclear scientist named Professor Alvin Redkowski, Olav Shalom. Alvin Redkowski was the chief scientist of Admiral Rickover, and Redkowski was the one who was responsible for developing the nuclear weapons for the American Navy, nuclear submarines, nuclear aircraft carriers, and so on. He was an Orthodox Jew, and he wore a yarmulke as he worked. A well-known personality. Anyway, So one day this man, Alvin Redkowski, walks into Mr. Gray's office and tells him that he has designed a new nuclear reactor. A new design for the core of a nuclear reactor, to be more specific, which has a different fuel cycle so that the byproducts of the reaction cannot be used to make bombs. Now, as you know, all the non-proliferation treaties that have gone on for past half century and more all deal with the fact that those countries that have nuclear weapons should keep them under control and not proliferate them, not ship them out or sell them or provide them to third world countries, to military dictatorships, and places like that where they will develop nuclear weapons. Nuclear energy is something that people should have, provides cheap electricity to places where there may be no other source of electricity, or other sources of electricity may be very expensive. But the problem is the standard nuclear fuel cycle, which uses uranium, produces plutonium as a byproduct. And plutonium is the fuel of nuclear weapons. Redkowski had developed a new nuclear fuel cycle using thorium as the main fuel, and no plutonium is produced as a byproduct, so these nuclear reactors cannot be used to produce nuclear weapons. So he came to Mr. Gray's office and said he wants Mr. Gray to set up a corporation where this nuclear reactor is going to be developed and produced and could be provided to any country in the world without any fear of it being used as a nuclear weapon. So Mr. Gray tells Rebbe Springer, this is what you were talking about in your article, in your ad, of swords into plowshares. We've taken the nuclear sword, the most destructive weapon on the face of the earth, and transformed it into something that can be used for peaceful purposes without any fear of it being used as a nuclear weapon. Rebbe Springer knew of, he was not an expert on, scientific issues, but he knew of our work in the Rabbi Yisrael Arley Research Institute on Moshiach and the Sciences, and he contacted me and he said he wants me to meet Mr. Gray and see what's going on here. And in short, a very close friendship developed very quickly between Rabbi Springer, myself, and Mr. Gray. And we were close friends. Mr. Gray and I are still close friends to this very day. Rabbi Springer, Olav Shalom, passed away a few years ago, but throughout the rest of his life, the three of us were very close. I tried to get Professor Redkowski himself to speak at our next Moshiach and Science conference. This was in 1994. I interviewed Redkowski earlier in the year before our conference because he couldn't come. He was in Eretz Yisrael at the time. He had already, when he retired from the Navy, he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and it was there that he developed his nuclear reactor. I found out the rest of the story from a friend of his, Dr. Naftali Berg, Olav Shalom, prominent Lubavitcher Chassid, who was director of the Advanced Technology Office of the Army Research Laboratory at the Pentagon, where advanced technological weapons were developed. Yeah, that's a story in itself, how Lubavitcher Chassid ended up being director of the top military laboratory at the Pentagon. Maybe we'll go into that next week. But Dr. Berg told me that he was a personal friend of Redkowski, and that, in fact, before Redkowski went to Eretz Yisrael after his retirement, Dr. Berg urged him to have Yechidus with the Rebbe MHM. And this Yechidus took place. Redkowski had a private audience, Yechidus, with the Rebbe MHM for 45 minutes. When I heard this, I was very jealous, because at the time of my chasana, my wife and I were zocher to have Yechidus with the Rebbe MHM, but it was between 5 and 10 minutes. And Redkowski here was in for 45 minutes. And Redkowski himself told me about this, And he told me that among the things that the Rebbe MHM told him was that he should continue to write his articles on Torah and science. He had written articles, and he did continue to write articles on Torah and science, particularly attacking evolution, which is contrary to Torah. And he explained in detail in some of his articles exactly what's wrong with evolution as a scientific theory. In other words, it's not a valid scientific theory. It's not valid scientifically, and it's wrong. So, like I said, I wanted to get Radkowski at the conference. He could not make the conference, so I did interview him in Shavat of 1994. This is January 1994.
So this reminds one of the conference 2 years ago of heads of state of major world powers, United States and Russia and so on, where it was decided that there was going to be a cutback in development of weapons, and the resources, the money and technology would be diverted, channeled into food production to help increase the availability of food in the world. And at that time, the Rebbe MHM said that this is the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah, that they will beat their swords into plowshares.
This is a sort of extension of the idea. Instead of making nuclear reactors which can be used for weapons, we'll now make them which can be used only for peace, and to give these impoverished nations a cheap and safe source of energy, so that they can apply it and also grow wealthy.
So you see your new reactor as
a major step towards world peace.
In the Gula.
Yeah.
After that interview, I brought the video of the interview into the Mazkirus, to the secretariat of the Rebbe Moshiach, and I gave it to Rabbi Klein. And I asked him to give it to the Rebbe Moshiach, as here we have a major scientist talking about v'chitzu chavosim le'itim, swords into plowshares, and I wanted the Rebbe Moshiach to have a copy of it. So I came back a few days later to ask Rabbi Klein if there was a reaction, a response, a bracha from the Rebbe MHM on it. And he told me that he showed it. He put it on the video for the Rebbe MHM to watch it. So the Rebbe MHM actually watched the video of that interview. Now that blew me away. That was like seventh heaven. Anyway, to be continued. We'll talk more about this in the next session, but here it is in fact an example. The corporation has been set up. It was initially called the Radkowski Thorium Power Corporation. It developed this nuclear reactor. It has expanded and developed, and now it is called the Lightbridge Corporation, and Mr. Gray's son is now the president of it, and check it out on the internet. Until next time, be well. We hope to see you next time in Yerushalayim HaKodesh with Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach revealed and the Gula complete. That should happen tonight. Takef miad mamash. Yechi Adonenu Merinu Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Le'olam Voed. Yechi Adonenu Merinu Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Le'olam Voed. Yechi Adonenu Merinu Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Le'olam Voed.